I want to discuss the next four films just briefly. Mad Miss Manton, Jesse James, Let Us Live, and Alexander Graham Bell.
Well, Mad Miss Manton I can speak of briefly because that was just a quickie that I did at RKO with my first one with Barbara Stanwyck. The only thing to say about it is that I was hardly aware of Barbara Stanwyck during that picture. Later, I fell in love with Barbara Stanwyck because she's one of the great women in the world, one of the great actresses, and one of the sweetest people. But I was so unhappy at the picture and so unhappy with the director that I'm sure, as far as Barbara Stanwyck is concerned, who is this surly son of a bitch, you know? But I didn't ever see it and don't remember it. It was a silly picture, and I don't remember how I happened to get stuck in it.
Jesse James.
Jesse James was one I had my choice. I think I was probably free of Walter Wanger by then, and I was not signed to any studio, so I was a freelance. And Jesse James' script was sent to me for the part of Frank James. And I read it, and I liked the part as a character that I would like to play. It didn't seem to me maybe as big a part as I had been playing. So my question, I needed somebody to advise me. You know, is it wrong to take a part that's smaller than you've been playing? Do you have to think career-wise? And I didn't ask my agents. I asked Henry Hathaway, and he read the script as a favor to me, and he said, do it by all means. And he was so right, because Frank James was the character that people really remembered, and because it was a good character. I don't mean because I was outstanding it, because it was a good character that I recognized when I read it.
Let Us Live.
Let Us Live. It was Columbia. It was John Brom and Maureen O'Sullivan, and it was, probably because I'd done You Can't Take It With You. It was similar. Nothing wrong with it except that it was like I'd been there before.
And Alexander Graham Bell.
That was, again, not as good a part as Frank James, but I thought it had some character to it, and I agreed to do it. Again, I was a freelance still with Don Amici, but it didn't turn out to be what I had hoped it might be for me.
Now we get into the Ford films. Your first association with Ford was in Young Mr. Lincoln, and the New York Times said that Fonda's performance kindles the film, at once gentle and quizzically comic.
Well, I don't remember that, but I'm happy. I was still not under contract to anybody, and I can't say names. Who wrote it?
Lamar Trotty.
Lamar Trotty, who wrote it, and the producer.
Wasn't it Melanie Johnson? No, it wasn't.
No.
It was.
He later became associated with UCLA and their
Kenneth McGowan.
Kenneth McGowan. Sent me the script. Or no, talked to me first. We've got a beautiful story about young Mr. Lincoln that we would like you to do. And my reaction was, oh, God, that's like playing Jesus to me, and I didn't think I could do it. And I didn't even want to talk about it. They eventually persuaded me to come to my house, and they did one evening, Kenneth McGowan and Lamar Trotty. And I think Lamar read it, I'm not sure which, but they read it out loud to me. And when they were through, I said, I agree, it's a beautiful, beautiful story, but I am too self-conscious to think that I could play Lincoln. I don't want to go and elaborate this too much, but they did persuade me to take a screen test. And I remember June Walker, who was out there for some other reason, played in the screen test with me. We didn't do a scene from the movie. We did a scene from a play of Lincoln.
Abe Lincoln in Illinois.
No, Missouri Legend or something like that. Yeah, it was Missouri Legend. Anyway, we did a scene from that for the test. And I remember being made up. It took about 3 hours to make me up in the makeup department with a big nose and the wart and the hairdo and everything like that. And we played the scene, and a day or so later I was called, and I went to the studio and was taken to a projection room and shown this screen test. And I remember at the beginning when I saw this character, I thought, my God, it's Lincoln. Until I opened my mouth and I heard my voice come out of that character, and that's when I went down like this. And I said, my fellas, so it was again months later when Ford, who'd been away someplace and had not been assigned to the picture, but he came back from wherever he'd been, and they assigned him to it or gave it to him, and he said yes, he'd like to do it. And I got a call to come in to see Mr. Ford. I'd never met him. I'd seen his work, and I'm a fan of John Ford films. And I went into this man's office, and he was sitting at a desk. I'll never forget it because I got to know him so well in the years afterwards. And my first impression was my last, which was still with that floppy felt hat, you know, and the dark glasses, and chewing on the handkerchief or the pipe or something, sort of as though he was always sort of, the hat's down here in his hand or a pipe or something up there, as though he didn't really want you to see him. I don't know what the thing is, but it was always sort of like this, you know, and you couldn't really see his eyes from the dark glasses. And this is not going to be used for anything except for yourself, is it? I mean,
Yeah.
dirty
No,
words.
no.
Because,
You'll
I mean, nobody listens to this except
No,
you,
not
is it?
no.
Because
this is just for
he used a four-letter word, which is typical of Ford. Because I come in and I'm standing there like a sailor with my white hat on, almost. You know, I'm in the presence of himself. And he says, "Sit down." And he says, "What the fuck is all this about you being afraid to play this picture?" Or something. They're not wanting to play this. You know, and Jesus Christ, you know, who do you think he is? The goddamn great emancipator? He's a jackleg lawyer in Springfield, for Christ's sake. In other words, he shamed me into it. He said, you know, this is not President Lincoln. This is a young lawyer in Springfield, which is what it was. And anyway, I went with him. And glad I am, because it was a fine picture. And I don't think Ford, at least he tells the story this way, ever saw me again from that first day in his office until the picture was over, not in the makeup of Lincoln. Now he said, I can't believe it's so, but that's the way, because but it's typical of Ford that he would dramatize it, that when we finished the picture on location, and the day we're going home, I'm coming through the lobby of whatever little hotel we were in Sacramento, and I'm not in makeup because we're going to catch the train to go home, and Ford does a big double take, and I dramatize this big whole thing. Is that Uncle Henry? Is that Cousin Henry? Anyway, it was a wonderful experience, and Ford was at his very top best, and when he was at his best, there wasn't anybody like him. His imaginative best. He would dream up things on the set that weren't indicated in the script at all, little bits of business for not just for me, for anybody, for one of the extras that filled it full of the little thing that made it such a special picture. And it was his, I know it was his touch. At the end of the picture, I don't know whether you remember it well, but after he's won the case, the trial of these two boys who were going to try to be convicted of a murder, and he's won the case, and he's walked out of the court to the congratulations of, who's the senator that he initially had the debates with? Douglas, yeah. And says, I'm just going to walk over the hill a piece. And there's a long shot of Lincoln as he starts to cross a bridge, and then there's a hill that's going up there. And as he gets up onto this, was it the bridge of the hill? Doesn't matter. Clouds start to come a little bit. It's a typical Ford thing, and a breeze came up enough so that he had to bend his head so that his hat wouldn't blow off, you know, and sort of gather himself together. And then it started to rain. In other words, it was the tears of the multitude, and it was Battle Hymn of the Republic on this back sound screen in the background, and it was Ford All Stops Out, but it was effective.
Was Drums Along the Mohawk right after that?
Right after that. As a matter of fact, I did 3 in a row with Ford. Lincoln, Drums Along the Mohawk, and Grapes of Wrath. And it's the first time he'd ever had an act. I think it's the first time he'd ever done 3 pictures within 6 months, because he doesn't like to work that much, but particularly with the same actor. And it was a love affair from the beginning with Ford and me. We were both crazy about each other, and we worked, as I say, we went into Drumsville on the Mohawk, which again was a wonderful experience. That was in Utah, location in Utah, and it was not in a town. We were way up at 11,000 feet in a valley, and it was 11,000 feet altitude. Not all of it, but we worked at 11,000 feet at different times. But anyway, the camp, we lived in a camp that was set up. Tents, wood floors, of course, but tents, a big dining hall, mess hall tent. And there was a campfire with huge logs that were in a ring around it. And every night, and this was where Ford was so smart, to have a company of several hundred, because with crew and cast, it amounted to several hundred that had to live and exist up here for, I think, 28 days or something like that. And without a town to go to for, with a bar, with a movie house or something else, he was aware that you had to keep these people entertained and occupied and happy. And he did it by organizing a campfire. Well, he had a name for it. It was like a big, it was like a Boy Scout camp or something. And I was in charge of the, camp entertainment committee or something. But there was a funny name for it, like it was Camp Junaluska for boys between the ages of 11. But at the same time, it was what was needed, because it was known that after you ate at 7:30, 8 o'clock, whatever it was, then you'd go and sit around the campfire, and every night there would be something different, entertainment. If it was just somebody playing on an accordion and singing, but there would be special things. And Ward Bond and I and somebody else worked up 3-part harmony and had a song fest one night. And at the end of whatever it was around the campfire, there was a bugler who was an actor, in the company to be a bugler, because there was action, war stuff in it. And he, always on a cue from Ford, would disappear from the campfire, because we were right in the woods, pine forests. And he would disappear out into the woods in the blackness. And when the campfire, the entertainment was finally over, you would hear taps coming from the woods. Now, I want to tell you that I get emotional remembering this. And everybody there would the same thing. It was a wonderful... Pappy Ford, that's why he was called Pappy Ford, because he cared about everybody, and he saw to it everybody was, happy all the time. That was the thing I remember most about that. But still working with Ford, this great director. Claudette, of course. It was a wonderful cast altogether. There was a lot of his stock company, his well-known stock company were in the picture.
Which leads us into the Grapes of Wrath.
And then it leads right into within days almost, because I think I was in Lincoln in May, and Grapes of Wrath was like October, and Drums and Old Malt was in between in August. So this was within 6 months we did the 3 pictures. Grapes of Wrath was the first one on a contract, because this now was obviously going to be a big picture. The novel had done so well, and every actor out there wanted to play Tom Joad. Zanuck, who had tried to get me under contract for the years since I'd been free from Wanger, and I just said, no, I'm very happy to be freelance, finally dangles Tom Joad as bait. And, I was led to believe that if I wanted to play Tom Joad, I had to sign his long-term contract. And I went for it. And it wasn't just to play Tom, because he did say, I've got great plans for you. He said, I don't want to give you this great part and then have you turn around and go to MGM and play a lot of crap over at MGM. He says, I want to build you up, Well, bullshit, because I did Grapes of Wrath and then nothing for the rest of my contract.
I got a list of those Fox pictures.
Yeah. But anyway, Grapes of Wrath was sort of almost the culmination of my relationship with Ford. I did 4 or 5 more subsequently. There were most of them good, but Grapes of Wrath was certainly, I would say, one of the toppers. And for everybody, it was a wonderful experience. Ma Joad was Jane Darwell, and I could go on and on and
Yeah.
on, and I don't know whether you want me to, about little typical things of Ford and the kind of director he was, best exemplified, let's say, by the way he handled the farewell scene, which is one of the very emotional scenes in Grapes of Wrath, where Tom knows he's being chased. He knows he's got to leave and get away from the family and hide, and he's got to tell his ma, and he wakes her up early in the morning before anybody else is up, and she's in the tent of this Okie camp, and he comes and wakes her up, and very quietly, without any dialogue, just whispers, and she gets up and puts on something, and they come out of the tent and cross and go down the side of the tent and sit on a bench beside the dance floor that's outdoors, where there had been a party and a dance the night before, now completely deserted. And when we sit on the bench, then there is the scene. There was the farewell scene with this beautiful words right out of Steinbeck. And Ford, now I don't think at the moment, at that time, that I was aware of what Ford was up to. It's since that I'm explaining it to you and to anybody else. But at the time, we never rehearsed the dialogue, the scene itself. Technically, it was a little difficult because the camera had to start inside the tent and pull out through the flaps and pan over and then dolly with us as we went. There's our dolly with us. Dolly with us as we went down beside the tent, maybe 20 or 30 feet, and then take a position as we sat together on the bench. And once we had sat on the bench and the camera is on us in a nice two-shot, then in a continuous scene, without stopping, we would go into the scene. But in rehearsal, we never got any further than sitting down. Ford would always cut. In other words, it's rehearsal for the camera, with the guys pushing the dolly and everything, and the guys that have to carry the boom, the sound boom, and everybody else technically. And as they would rehearse it, and we would finally sit down, Ford would say, "All right, cut." Now, they wouldn't go any further, because nobody else had to move any further, and we would go into the dialogue, but we wouldn't. So for the hours that it took to be sure that Greg Tolan and his camera crew and the sound knew what to do technically, Jane Darwell and I never did say the lines in a rehearsal. We did to each other, sitting in our dressing room in our camp stools or someplace, not for Ford. But he knew that both of us were prepared. I mean, I'm putting this thought in his mind, but I'm sure he knew what he could expect from Jane and from me. What he's doing is, without making it obvious to us, he's getting that first emotion. He's getting the first impression. He wants the first take. Now, this was always true. He was always unhappy if he couldn't get a scene in the first take. Not because he didn't want to waste film or for economic reasons. He wanted, let's call them happy accidents. If a bad accident happened, obviously you take it again. But he wanted things that happened in the first take, as against a Willie Wyler, who's perfectly valid in his reasons, who wants to rehearse and rehearse and rehearse and try it this way and this way and this way. Ford wanted to get that happy accident, or to get the first, particularly in an emotional scene, where if you really have an emotion and can work on it, it's very difficult to recapture that 2 times or 10 times or 20 times, next to impossible. So he never did rehearse it. As a result, Jane Darwell and I were so ready, and like this, we were being held back. Those reins had been on us because we wanted to go. We knew we had a hell of a scene to play, and nobody was letting us play it. So when finally everybody goes, and this is a take, and we're in, boy, we went, and the emotion was in both of us to such an extent that both of us, without talking to each other about it, but in the scene, were aware that this mustn't get out of hand, obviously. So that's the great thing, to have an emotion going for you, and then to be able to hold it back yourself. So the emotion is there, obviously, and the camera's getting it, but you're in control. That's something you don't really ever can duplicate technically. Anyway, that's Ford. That's where Ford was so. I don't know where he would get this sensitivity, because Christ knows it's not in his background, his main background or his early background as a stunt man, as a property man for his brother, and early work in the films. But he had become this man who understood actors. I don't know anybody that understood actors any better than Ford. And at the same time, he could be a sadistic bastard. Sometimes for a purpose, again in Grapes of Wrath. A scene with the whole family, that is all the Joads, and Unc and Grandpa and Grandma and the cousins and the youngsters. We have arrived at an Okie camp and pulled our big bus into a truck into an open area, and the family sort of scatters to separate, whatever they have to do, and Ma is getting ready with the bean soup or whatever we're going to have to eat, and a little open fire there with a kettle. And it's ready, and she calls us back from wherever we are, and now the family comes to eat. And as we come back to eat, there is a semicircle about 30 feet away of kids who have already been in this Okie camp, who are obviously hungry, and they are not going to come up and ask for it. They're just standing 30 feet away. And I mean, they're just standing like this and just looking. And when we come back and see them, we can hardly eat it in front of them because we know that they're hungry, but we don't have enough. Well, in other words, it was a very emotional scene. It was all there going for us. I don't know which of the actors. I think it was Unc. I don't remember his name. But I wasn't watching him, so I don't know what he did. But he must have done something with his face because there wasn't any dialogue that showed that he was aware this was an emotional scene. I mean, he overdid something. And Ford stopped, and he said, where then, 4-letter words in front of everybody, who'd you have Teresa Helburn over to your house last night working on that scene? Where did he come from? Where did Teresa Helburn come from? Because this was the woman who had been the president of the Theater Guild for 50 years or something. And where would Ford know about her? And where would it occur to him to think of using the name Teresa Helburn, who would come over? You're really working on it. Anyway, he shamed this guy out of acting, which was exactly right, because all of these people, the Okies, not just the Joes, the Okies, had been through so much that they were drained of emotion. They didn't show emotion. If you look at the still photographs of Margaret Burkewhite and the others who took the pictures in that era of the Okies, the characters like Ma Joad, they're not tears in their eyes or anything like that. They just stark, and that's what they should have been, and that's what this guy was when Ford got through with him, because he was scared, and it drained him of emotion. But in other words, Ford gets his effects one way or another.
I wondered, how did he, Victor Mature, the best thing he ever did was in My Darling Clementine, I think, and how did, Ford must have got to him somehow.
He wasn't rough on him, I'll say that. Ford was always rough on Ward Bond, because Ward Bond was one of his closest friends, and he always used Ward as the patsy, and it would really be, and Ward knew it, and Ward could take it.
Bond played him in a movie.
That's right, was in almost
Ford directed him.
Bond was in Young Mr. Lincoln. He was in Drumsel on the Mohawk. He was in Grapes of Wrath. He played a cop, traffic cop, motorcycle cop in Grapes of Wrath, a bit part. In Darling Clementine, he played one of the brothers, my brother. But if there was something about, let's say, who's the one you were saying?
Victor Mature.
Victor Mature, Ford wouldn't say anything to Victor Mature, but he would eat Ward Bond up and down, you see, and get it out of his system. Now, I don't know quite what his rationalization, justification would be, but what he did do, and he did it in a way that didn't even hurt Victor. I mean, a Victor who couldn't handle long passages of dialogue, he would cut the dialogue down to a few words. And if something had to be said, he'd give the words to somebody else. But he never did it in a way that made Victor hurt, I know, because he was always very friendly with Victor. That was Darling Clementine. I don't know whether we're ready to talk about that, but that was one of the...
They're going in the sequence of Ford, if you want to go on.
It was one of the good Westerns. I've done at least my share of Westerns in the 60-odd pictures, and that's one of the real good ones, Darling Clementine. And it's called one of the good westerns by the people who talk about westerns particularly.
We have another quick list. These are Fox films between 1940 and 42, except for one. Lillian Russell, Chad Hanna, Wild Geese Calling, You Belong to Me, Rings on Her Fingers, and The Magnificent Dope.
Well, except for You Belong to Me, I think they're all Fox.
Yeah,
Is that
that's
right?
Columbia,
Yeah.
You Belong to Me.
Yeah. And they were, all of them, pictures that I like to forget. They were pictures that I wound up having to do because I was under contract. There were a lot of others that I didn't do that I was asked to do that I got out of doing. But these are ones that I didn't get out of doing.
We can go on with
I would always go to Zanek's office and holler and yell and scream and sometimes wind up doing these and sometimes get out of it and be able to go to Columbia to do You Only Live One, You Belong to Me, or Male Animal at Warner's, or the ones that I did get away to do.
Then we can move on to the Lady Eve, the Sturgis
That
Cult.
was one that I got away from Fox to do. I don't know why. I don't know where Sturgis came up with me as an idea, because I hadn't really done anything except possibly Moon's Our Home, and I don't know whether that's the one. But it was a great surprise to me that Sturgis asked for me, and I was delighted because this was the kind of thing that I wanted to do, and I wasn't getting a chance because Rings on Her Fingers and so on were not that kind of picture at Fox. But this one was, and I loved the script, and I begged Zanuck to let me do it, and he finally agreed, and I was loaned over. And that was my second picture with Barbara Stanwyck, and that's when I discovered Barbara Stanwyck. And she discovered that I wasn't the shit that she thought I was the first time. But it was a great experience. I mean, it was a funny picture, a funny script, and Sturgis was I guess he was a good director. I don't really know. He must have been, because he did other pictures too that were good. I remember, as a director though, he would laugh at his own stuff more than anybody else, and often we would have to do a take over and over again because he would be sitting under the camera and break out into hysterics. Over and over again.
What about the Male Animal?
That one I enjoyed doing, and again I got away from Fox to do. And that was the request of the original Elliot Nugent, who had played it in New York and had co-authored it and was going to direct the picture, and he asked me to do it, and I was very happy to have been asked and was glad to be able to get away to do it, and enjoyed doing it, and it was one of the good ones.
The sequence he did in Tales of Manhattan was delightful. That little bit with you and Ginger Rogers. I think it lasts about 15 or 20 minutes.
That was, I was doing what else I was doing. I was doing another picture and a lot at the same time, and I think the war had already started, and I was already beginning to talk about joining the Navy, and they were trying to crowd as many pictures as they could in before I got away. And I think I bicycled from one set to another one and did that one. I can't remember what the other one would have been. Would you know?
Well, it would have been possibly
I think even
Magnificent Dope or Rings on Her Fingers, or
No, it was later than that.
was it?
it might have been Lady Eve or Male Animal.
No, because he was at
It had to be at Fox. I mean, I had to be in another picture at Fox.
Well,
It's one of those
Sergeant
ones we
or-
bombed through very quickly then.
It couldn't have been an Oxbow incident because your
No.
hair was.
No, this one's 42 in Oxbow.
It was before Oxbow or Immortal Sergeant. I think it was in the period of.
Well, I forget myself.
It wasn't Wild Geese Calling because that was period. It was completely different.
Now we get to the ones that I told you about, the one I call the RKO weirdos, the strange ones for you, starting with The Big Street.
Well, I don't know why you call it a weirdo unless it's just
It's such a
because-
strange, they're all
Yeah.
sort of offbeat either for you in casting or...
What was the date on that?
42 for The Big Street.
So that was, again, on loan out from 20th Century, and again, an opportunity to get away from the ones that I'd been doing that I wasn't happy about. But this, boy, names aren't just coming to me.
Irving Reese.
Well, I didn't want to remember his name, but the author,
Damon Runyon.
Damon Runyon, was brought out to produce it himself, and it's the only one he ever did produce. and he didn't really function as a producer, but he was called the producer. And he was a dear man. I didn't get to know him intimately, but I did get to know him. And he would wander on the set and be very nice, and you'd talk to him a while, and he'd wander off. He didn't know what the hell was going on. But it was Lucy's first big break, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, she had a smaller, unimportant role.
Yeah.
This was her first good part.
And I enjoyed it. I mean, I enjoyed this. I chose it. It was a good script. I enjoyed the picture. I enjoyed the part. It was a character part that I thought it would be fun to play. I didn't get along with the director, but a lot of times I don't get along with directors. I don't remember exactly why now, but he just didn't seem to me to have really anything. He wasn't good enough.
About 4 years later, I think you made Long Night with Litvak at RKO.
Well, now Litvak came to me and called me, and he said, "Would you, if you got time, to come down and sit with me in a projection room and run a movie?" I said, "Sure." So we went. I guess it was RKO projection room, and he ran a French movie called, literally translated like "sun up" or "sunrise."
Daybreak.
Daybreak, yeah.
Jean Gabin.
Jean Gabin and another actor who was just great to play the character part, and I'll never remember his name, and if you remember it, I'm going to hate you the rest of my life.
It wasn't Pierre Fernet.
I don't know.
Who played the magician?
Yeah.
Oh well, that's
Whoever he was.
Arletty was the leading lady. But
Yeah. Whoever he was a great character, man. Anyway, it was a fantastically good picture. And I wasn't really functioning right, because I should have thought, well, why do you think you can make this an American movie? Because the flavor was so typically French. But I didn't think in those terms, nor did I think in terms of why Litvak, who's not an American. But Litvak had the idea that he wanted to make this remake it as in a picture and lay it in Pennsylvania someplace in the steel or mining country. And I was so taken with the French picture, I said, well, Jesus, great. I think it was a wonderful picture. But later I realized the problems with translating that, particularly the magician's character, just didn't translate. We don't have anybody like that. That kind of show business didn't exist either. And it just didn't make any sense. I liked Barbara Bel Geddes. It was her first part, wasn't it? Wasn't it?
his film.
And we got along fine. It was the first time I'd known Barbara. And I got along with Litvak. Should I tell the story?
you can always,
Yeah.
you'll see all of it.
This is typical of the problem that I had, or that the picture had, with Litvak directing it. We were doing the scene eventually, where I kill the character that
Vincent Price.
plays. He comes to my room up in this 4th floor rooming house and challenges me or something, I don't know exactly what, and I eventually shoot him. Now, all the way through this picture, Litvak kept a moviola on the set, and he would run the original French scene of the scene that we were going to be doing, that we would be rehearsing to film. He would go to the moviola, and he'd study it on the moviola, and Carl Foreman, as a matter of fact, was his dialogue director, and I remember he had in his dressing room the American Thesaurus of Slang and books, big books like this, and he would get the French word, and that would be translated like, let's say, kill, Well, you can look up, and if that was the Thesaurus of Slang, I don't know what the book was, you could find, like 500 words to bump off, to knock off, just so to mean kill. And he would do that and sort of try to make this Americanized with Carl Foreman's help, and kept running this French version. Well, in the scene that I'm talking about, when I eventually killed Vincent Price, in this scene, and Tola's gone back to the moviola, and he comes back to the set, and he says, now, when Hank does this or says this, you say to Vincent, he says, you say no, no 1,000 times no. And I heard him say this, and Vincent said, oh, yeah. So he says, no, no 1,000 times no. And I thought, well, now what in the world could Tola be thinking of? This is one of the most serious, it's not comedy. I wind up shooting the guy and eventually have to hole up there, and they're after me, of course. And I couldn't believe it. And the thing is that Tola Litvak, now if you have to stop, you stop me.
Yeah.
Tola Litvak, who is not an American, his ear doesn't tell him that no, no 1,000 times no cannot be said in a serious scene. In the French version, I don't know what he said, mille no, or whatever the words were, but when you translate it literally into no, no 1,000 times no, boy, it's a joke, and I try to tell him that. But this time, we had had so many sessions like this that he just wasn't listening to me anymore.